Okay, we're back. Here's part two. I hope that you've had some time to try some of this out and do some observation in your classroom, and see what you notice. I'd be so curious to hear. But let's keep on going, shall we? Okay, so quick pause here to do a quick check-in. So I'm curious, I'm interested to invite you to write down what it is that you noticed over the past little while since the first part of the webinar to now. So take a moment and just pause the recording, write what it is that you'd like to write. I encourage you to set some sort of intention for the second part of this webinar series, and what do you hope to get from the rest of our time together? Okay, so go ahead and pause. And when you're ready, come on back. I'll be right here. Okay, we're back. Deep breath. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about total load theory. I know that sounds very academic, but it's really very simple. And the way that I would like to invite you to consider total load theory as it has to do in your classroom is sort of like a bag of tokens, if you will, right? So you wake up in the morning and things are going really well. You get enough sleep, your breakfast is good, you don't burn the toast or anything like that. You've got your coffee and it tastes really good. It's the perfect temperature. And you get out of the door and you get to school on time and everything is well. Your outfit feels great. You know, your hair looks good. All is well. So your bag of tokens is pretty full. So you can take what comes at you with a little more cushion, right? So, but as the day goes on, things take tokens out of your bag, right? Like for instance, maybe you get to work and you notice that your colleague is going to be late or isn't there, and there's a substitute that you don't know. Tokens out. Maybe your school leader says, "Oh, we need to talk after school," but you don't know what it's about. Tokens out. Someone drops off their child and the family is upset about something, or they speak to you in a way that you don't like very much. Tokens out. So our tokens, your bag of tokens, it was full. And now, the beginning of the day, there's just a few left. So the total load theory kind of addresses that. Like, what is our cushion? What is our bank account, if you will, of being able to handle and to manage with as much grace and kindness and respect as possible? Right. Some of us have had to begin days with only a few tokens left, and if we don't put tokens back in, then we're at our wits' end. We might raise our voice. We might say things that we don't mean to say or do things that we don't mean to do because we have emptied out. We have reached the total load, if you will. And one more thing is just going to spill the milk all over the floor, right? So, with this in mind for ourselves, we can consider, what about for the children? What about for each individual child? They all have a total load that they can carry, right? They have a finite amount of tokens in their bag when they come to school. Maybe their bag is empty and they've reached their they can't take anymore, and they see, oh my gosh, my favorite teacher's not here. They fall apart, right? Their proverbial milk has spilled. So what it might look like when overload happens, when we are at our wits' end, we haven't been able to care for ourselves, to regulate ourselves in a way that refills our bag of tokens, if you will. What can that look like? It could look like that we fight. We maybe us as the adults, we may raise our voice, or we might use a tone that we wouldn't typically use if things were okay and we were regulated. Our children may straight up fight. They might be more inclined to hit their friend or to push their friend when they are frustrated because they are at their wits' end, right? It also could look like freeze. So we just become frozen, can't really respond, don't really do what is supposed to happen next, right? It might be that they run away or avoid or they go, right? Come, it's time to come. I want to talk to you about something. And the child turns and runs the other way, right? What about us? Do we run away? We might feel like we want to, right? What about flop, where they just flop, become passive, drop? Maybe they might straight up drop to the floor, right? Or fawn, where they befriend, right? So these are all indicators that overload is happening. These can be those indicators, right? And you've probably seen these behaviors, these types of responses happen without maybe considering, is this a response to some sort of overload, right? Are they out of tokens? How can I refill that? How can I help them refill their bag of tokens? How can I notice this in myself? And what do I do to refill my bag of tokens, right? What is it that you do to refill when you're empty? So let's take a look at your load, your total load. Think about a time when you were past your total load capacity. It's like you couldn't do anything more. And if somebody asked you to do one more thing, you might feel like you would explode or run away or flop or something else, right? Think about what led to that, right? And what did you do when you get to that point? Sometimes we handle it well, and sometimes we handle it not so well. Remember that we are human and we're still learning how to manage this, right? So, with that practice and practice after we've done some self reflection of what fills up our bag and what empties our bag, we can be mindful of when those things happen and then take some steps to remedy that. Right. So let's take a moment and pause and write about that. So think about a time when you were at your wits' end, you were toast, you were done, right? And what did you do to refill that bag of tokens? What is it that refills that? Is it a kind word from someone? Is it some quality time spent with another person? Is it a hug from someone, or for yourself? Is it silence? Is it a really good cup of coffee? Is it some sort of treat that you give to yourself? Whatever that treat might be. What is it that you do to refill when you're empty? Right. So let's write that down. So pause the recording and come on back after you've written that down, and we'll keep going. Okay, we're back. Deep breath. So we've done that process for ourselves. Now, let's do that process for children. Okay, so we're going to take a look at their total load, what they can manage in a day throughout the day, right? So think about a time when you had a child that went past their total load capacity. They were out of tokens. What led to that, and what did you do, right? I'd be curious to know if they did something to refill their bag, right? Has this child that comes to your mind, do they already have some skills and techniques that they already put into place to help themselves feel better or to help fill their token bag, right? I mean, some children can really know from practice and from important adults that can help guide them. They can know to themselves, I need to go take a break in the cozy corner. I'm going to go and be still. I need to have snack. I think I need a rest. I need a hug. So what skills do your children have now to refill their own load? And what and how can you teach into that? Okay, so let's pause a second again and take a look at that. Think about a child who were past their capacity. What do you think led to that, and what did you do? It could be interesting to do this a thought process for several different children. If you have more than a few in your classroom that you're curious about, or that you're concerned about managing that total load capacity, we can think, okay, well, what leads up to that? Is there some commonality that pushes children past their load capacity? And what can we do to remedy that? Okay, so pause a little bit, write that down for one or two or several children. And when you're ready, push play again. I'll be right here. Okay, deep breath, we're back. Okay, now we're going to shift gears just a little bit. But know that when children reach that total load capacity, it could result in maybe a tantrum or a sensory meltdown. Now, how do we tell the difference between the two? Because they are different, and how we can respond to them is different as well, right? So let's take a look at it. All right. So there's a link in your workbook that I'd like for you to pause this, go watch it, and write down your thoughts. What do you think about that? The woman who will be speaking speaks about upstairs brain and downstairs brain, speaks about, the idea of when you've flipped your lid. Remember what you know about how our brain works, right? And when we're dysregulated, when we're really operating from our emotional sense, the frontal lobe, the front part of our brain, just really unplugs, right? And we're operating from that middle part of the brain that tells us to fight or run away or to flop, one of those things. So when we are operating from that emotional survival kind of part of our brain, we're not logical for the most part, right? Because we're going to talk about the difference between sensory meltdown and tantrum. And the frontal lobe connection is one of the differences. I'll tell you about that really soon. But pause, go watch that, and come on back. And when you're ready, we'll carry on. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that, and really feel free. Any of the video links that I have shared with you in your workbook, please share them with your colleagues, with your families, so that others around you can kind of share in the learning too. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between tantrum and meltdown. I had a really wonderful conversation with Hannah, who's the host of KATU's Afternoon Live. It's an afternoon show here in Portland, Oregon. And I'm really lucky enough to be a frequent guest there. And I'll put the link to that. Also, I'll send it to you in your email that has the link to this. So if you want to listen to me talk about the difference between tantrum and meltdown, Hannah and I had a really good conversation about the difference. Okay, but here's pretty much what I said anyway. So a tantrum is more goal oriented, right? The child specifically wants something, right? They want to get something that they don't have, whether it is a connection, if it's a social connection, or the red ball, or if it's permission to do something, or whatever it is. There's something that they want, and there's a goal to be met. And for whatever reason, they can't get that goal met. So a tantrum ensues. Okay. Now, a meltdown, a sensory meltdown, there's not really a goal, right? It's a response to so much sensory overload that their total load capacity is wiped out and they fall apart, right? So at that point, their frontal lobe is really not connected. They are very much moving and operating from a place of their middle brain, pure emotion, pure survival. And there could be, and probably are not, any big demands that are made before or during the meltdown. The big emotion is happening, the meltdown is happening. And oftentimes there's not necessarily a goal attached to that, right? Except if you would consider the goal of getting out of that situation, which could be a goal, actually. Okay. So here's another graphic that compares and contrasts tantrum and meltdown. So let's just take a moment and take a look at this. So tantrum is controlled. A child is able to talk to you. They still have their frontal lobe. They still have some verbal skills, some reasoning, some logic, right? So they things their emotions tend to calm down pretty quickly after the matter is resolved, after they get what it is that they want. They wanted their red crayon, or they wanted to be first in line, and they were falling apart in a tantrum kind of way. Once they are in the front of the line, or they get that red ball, okay, all is well, right? So the calm down happens pretty quickly after the matter is resolved in a tantrum. Now, often in a tantrum, there's some sort of action that is moving them toward getting what it is that they want. So their actions are purposeful, right? So they might be grabbing at the red ball, or they might be pushing to get to the front of the line, right? When there's no audience, they will stop for a tantrum. Now, I bet all of us have been in this situation where a tantrum was happening, and we learned, okay, I'm not going to give any emotional attention to that, because what I give emotional attention to will continue. We all know that, right? So we step away and we go over here. Well, we turn around, there's the child, and they come and drop right in front of us, continuing the tantrum. Huh. That happens sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah. So when there's not an audience, often that tantrum will stop, right? So when we gather other children around here, yeah, Abby's having a really hard time over there, so we're just going to be here, and when Abby's ready, Abby can join us, right? When the audience moves away, her behavior, her tantrum will often settle, unless she comes over to us to gain back that audience, right? Okay, so a meltdown, sensory meltdown, is a little different in these ways, right? So definitely there's not regulation, right? There's not a regulation of their emotion. They're unable to speak or receive any information during a meltdown, right? So there's no, we might say there's just no reasoning when that happens. Well, right, of course not, because their frontal lobe is really unplugged, right? So processing information is a really big ask for somebody who is in meltdown mode, right? Next, in meltdown, it takes a while to regulate their emotions, and they won't calm down. The regulation doesn't happen even if the issue is resolved, right? So even if you say, come, be in front of the line, or here's the red ball, the meltdown continues, right? So it takes a while to regulate their emotions, and there's not a calm down even when the issue is resolved. It resolved in our mind, right? Okay, next, in a meltdown, it's not driven by a goal, right? The response is often to that feeling of overwhelm, that sensory overload, that sensi ovi, when it's too loud, too much, too busy, too this, too that, too tight, too loose, right? It's too much, right? So that when it's not driven by a goal, the response is to feeling that sense of overload and feeling overwhelmed. Meltdowns also stop only when they have moved through it, right? When they've tired themselves, or there's a change in sensory input, right? So they can get to a place where the sensory input that is causing that overload can be eliminated. The lights are turned down, the music is turned off, the friend who keeps talking to them is moved away, right? When we can have some sort of change in that sensory input, the child can manage with less input. They can manage their emotions becoming more and more regulated right then, right? So that's the beauty of having some sort of sensory calming space in your classroom or in your home, right? Is there a place where children can go to eliminate as much sensory input as possible, right? So for example, I'm thinking of many schools that I've worked with in developing and creating sensory calming spaces, and they can have all kinds of names, like Cozy Corner, or I knew one school who called it Rainbow Bright, which I kind of loved, right? So it was super calm. There wasn't a lot of really fascinating and interesting things to do, maybe a book or two, not much, a few items to choose from, but not much. So you want to keep it as simple and as clean and clear as possible, because what are you trying to do? You're trying to limit the sensory input, the sensory overload, right? So they're as lovely as a, a tool tent kind of thing with twinkle lights and music and that kind of thing is lovely. It doesn't serve the same purpose as a calming space for children who are experiencing sensory meltdown or sensory overload. So consider that as you're creating your sensory space, your sensory calming space, or your sensory activating space. Those are two very different experiences, have two very different purposes, right? Okay. So deep breath. Now we know the difference between tantrum and meltdown. Okay, let's talk about children in our environment, or colleagues or ourselves who may be neurodivergent. So let's talk about that. Um, Often you'll see a sensory meltdown, a meltdown in children who are neurodivergent. We will notice some what people in the community might call rumblings, right? Starts with a pre-meltdown signs called rumblings, which can be verbal or physical behaviors that signal an imminent meltdown. So often those rumblings are an attempt to regulate, right? Or to get out of that sensory situation that's causing that feeling of impending meltdown, right? It's a pretty uncomfortable place for them to be. So as we get to know the children in our classroom and in our community, we'll be able to notice what those rumblings are, and then intervene, assist before the full-on meltdown happens. And it's a beautiful thing when you're able to do that and to assist early rather than when the meltdown is in full force, and we keep them safe and others safe until that big feeling and the meltdown passes, right? So I'm thinking about a particular child who was neurodivergent, and his rumblings were rocking back and forth from one foot to the other, and a really quiet hum sound. And we didn't know that at first, but then after a while, we started to notice, that's what happens. That means that Ian is really becoming sensory on sensory overload right now. Now is a time to give Ian a fidget or a something to rub, or permission or invitation to go to this space where it's really quiet and nobody's going to say anything to him, so that he can calm before things go into full-on meltdown, right? So the children in your classroom who you know are neurodivergent, you can start to really observe. Do you notice rumblings that happen? Does the family notice that? Maybe they know too. They probably do. It's a great question to ask. So Ian's rocking back and forth in the low hum, some would call a stimming, right? Which is an attempt to regulate, right? So if at all possible, can you let that stimming happen? Let them practice regulating so that they don't go into full-on meltdown, right? There's learning how to do that, and we can assist when we know what that is, right? Okay. So this meltdown may be caused by overstimulation or an undesirable sensory input, right? So depending on what sensory sensitivity they have, we can be aware of that and know, okay, it's when I'm thinking of a particular child who really wanted his socks pulled way up high and super smooth. That was really important to him. And, over time, as his socks would get older, they would get slumpier. That's not a real word, but you know what I'm talking about. They would shift down his leg, and that was a sensory input that was not desirable by him. So he would keep pulling his socks up, keep pulling his socks up, and running on the playground, and his socks would shift down. And that, what we noticed, that simple thing of when his socks kept, slumping down, that could lead to a meltdown because of his sensory sensitivity to the feel of the socks on his skin of his legs, right? So we felt really successful when we asked the parent to have a brand new pair of socks at the school all the time. So when the socks were becoming an issue and not as tight, we can, hey, would you like a different pair of socks? And almost always he would say yes. He would change out of those socks into the new socks, and all was well. It was great. Okay, so that's just one thought and what we noticed as a rumbling that would happen and undesirable sensory input that could lead a particular child to meltdown. That's one way we helped. Okay, more to say about this is that, let's not limit this to young children, right? So all of this can happen to teens and adults who are neurodivergent. So you may work with someone, or you yourself may be aware of what are your rumblings, right? That might lead you to meltdown. And what can you do to notice that and shift it so that meltdown isn't a guarantee for you or for your colleagues or for other teens, older children too. A meltdown can happen with or without an audience, right? So earlier we talked about how the meltdown, the tantrum kind of needed an audience to continue, and a meltdown happened regardless of the audience. Same thing here, right? Typically, neurodivergent children have meltdowns that last longer than tantrums. Most sensory meltdowns for any child last longer than tantrums. If we think about how long it takes to recover and to have time pass, maybe water, maybe movement helps, right? But to move through that big emotion, through that arc of feeling really uncomfortable, heading into meltdown until that big feeling begins to pass, the sensory overload begins to settle, the body itself begins to settle, taking some deep breaths. And that arc of recovery can take longer than the recovery of a tantrum. So some reminders to think about. But I also want to say here, there's so much more we can talk about, and there's so much that I haven't woven into this webinar about children who are neurodivergent, because there's so much information, and there's so much that we can learn and that we know, right? So for more information about that, you can reach out to me, and I can absolutely send you some great resources that dives deeper into PNV, proprioceptive and vestibular input, sensory processing, sensory struggles for children who are on the spectrum. Okay, so with that being said, let's look at some reminders before we go forward. Okay, so what about your room? Is it sensory friendly? Are there sensory activators in there? And sometimes you want some of those, yes, and sometimes we don't. So let's take a look at it. Pause, go look at your space, take some notes. Have you noticed, and we're going to talk about observation shortly, so we can do more of that then, but are there places where children can go when they're on sensory overload? Is there a place where they could go for calm, right? Maybe they're not on sensory overload, but they want to go to a place that's more your cozy corner that maybe has the twinkle lights, right? Okay, so check out your room. Does your room have sensory activators? Are they necessary? Can you edit those? Questions to consider. Maybe you want to, maybe you don't, right? Depends on your community, depends on your prepared environment, right? Okay. Another reminder is to stay calm and be kind. That seems like well, Amy, of course, I'm going to do that. I'm going to stay calm. I'm going to be kind. Okay, let's just remember total load theory. All right. Are you in overload when you have a child who is moving into meltdown? Is it happening frequently? Do you have more than one child who has frequent meltdowns or frequent tantrums? Those are definite token taker outers, right? So it's harder for us to stay calm and remain kind when we have surpassed our own total load capacity, right? So earlier when we wrote down how we refill, right? Yeah. How have you built that into your day to day? Is there another person that you can connect with, maybe a colleague, co-teacher, something like that, who notices your rumblings, to borrow that phrase, right? How can they tell when you are reaching your wit's end, right? How can you tell yourself, right? It's harder for you to notice yourself the farther you get into your dysregulation. All right. So, are there other people that can help you with that? Right. Okay. So, stay calm, be kind. That sounds so easy. And sometimes it can be very difficult. So, I'm just saying that here. Okay. Um, Another important reminder is, remember, the frontal lobe is not plugged in. Processing language is a big, almost impossible ask for children who are in a sensory meltdown. So when we ask, what's wrong? They can't tell us. They can't tell us. So refrain from asking, what's the matter? What happened? We can get to what happened another time, but when they are in meltdown, they really just can't tell us. Okay. So, with that in mind, we can remember to accept it and not fight it. Definitely, we want to keep safe, keep the children and the child who is in a meltdown or tantrum safe, right? So, yes, safety, 100%, and accept that that is what's happening, that the meltdown will finish when it's finished. Am I keeping everyone safe? Am I eliminating as many words as most of the words that I can, right? And I'm not going to fight it. Like, oh, come on. Oh, stop crying. Because I don't think anybody in the history of being told stop crying has ever stopped crying. I'm trying to think. I can't think of that. Maybe we learned how to go and hold on to that cry, but still that emotion is still there. Okay, so accept it, don't fight it. The next thing is to keep it simple, right? In your classroom, check out your space. Is there anything that could be edited out, right? Do you still have the artwork from a project that you did for St. Patrick's Day and it's November, right? What can you edit out to keep it simple, right? Think of all of the senses, especially P and V, and how have you created a space that simplifies and meets the skills that your children have without sending them into overload. Does that make sense? Okay, deep breath. And before we talk about Theo, I'm going to get some water. Okay, so meet Theo. So Theo's a toddler, comes to school and it didn't sleep well because maybe there is maybe a brand new baby or somebody might be visiting, and for whatever reason Theo didn't get the amount of sleep that he usually gets, and that is really helpful for him to maintain his not over what I'm trying to say, surpass his total load capacity. But he didn't sleep well, you could tell, right? Maybe some dark circles under their eyes, or a sense in his facial expression, or the way he uses his body, or the way he interacts with us to let us know, okay, didn't sleep a lot. or maybe the family lets us know. Also, there's some sort of rushy feeling in the morning, right? It could be, Theo just really wanted to dress himself because he's learning how to do that. It feels really good to put his own shoes on or his own boots on or his own shirt on. But you know what? Mama pulled my shirt off and then put another one on me without giving me a moment to decide. I don't want to wear that red shirt. I want to wear the blue one because the blue one feels really soft and that red one is kind of scratchy, right? But no, I was rushed and someone dressed me without asking my permission or giving me a moment or forecasting what they were doing. Next, that shirt that I had put on, that scratchy red shirt, it feels awful. It has a feel. Oh, and by the way, I'm growing out of my socks. And now my feet feel squished in my socks and the seam is weird across my toes. Theo also didn't finish breakfast, right? They had to get up and get out and get in the car because they overslept, right? I got some scrambled eggs, but I was just playing around with them. I was squishing them with my spoon. It was really fun. It felt good to do, and I was really exploring the consistency of my eggs. And so, yeah, I got pulled out of my chair. It's like, well, we got to go, and Mom's annoyed. My important person is kind of annoyed at me. And I just got a power bar in the car. And then now we're off. I get to school and I'm excited to see my teacher that I love so much, but they're not there. They're sick. And who is this person who's a substitute? And I've never met before. I don't know this person. Who are you? Theo also was playing, got in the classroom and had something, his favorite thing, his favorite shaker was in his hand. And he was just doing his own thing, minding his own business. And somebody came and just took it right out of my hand. Oh, Theo. Oh yeah. Theo's dad is out of town. And maybe as a teacher, you didn't know that yet, but Theo's really missing that because daddy is the one who reads the books at night, or the parent who is out of town is the one that fixes the eggs the way that I want them fixed and who lets me wear the blue shirt. You see where I'm getting at? Yeah. Oh, and so when I'm really thinking about that, my daddy's out of town or my person's out of town, and I want to go to my teacher and get a cuddle, wait a minute, who's in their lap? That's my favorite. That's my lap. So all of this builds up, and Theo, what happens? Meltdown. So there's a drop to the floor. There's crying. There's, the snack is coming out of his mouth, right? What's happening? What's the matter? He can't respond. He can't reason. And it's going to take a while before this feeling passes. Theo is in meltdown. It's a toddler meltdown. And now let's meet Alice. Now, Alice is a little older and preschooler, and she didn't sleep well either. You can tell. Dark circles. You know her well enough to know, ooh, not a lot of sleep. Absolutely there's a brand new baby at home who doesn't sleep through the night yet. Alice was rushed also. She had started this new Lego project in her room, and the important adult came in and said, it's time to go. What are you doing? Why are you still in your pajamas? Let's go. Let's go. So I couldn't finish my Lego project. I had to change out of my amazing pajamas into a shirt and maybe, oh, wait a minute. My favorite leggings where are they? They must be in the laundry. They're not available. I have to wear something else. And they feel weird. I'm outgrowing everything. Ugh. Well, I didn't finish my breakfast because we were rushed and I took longer than usual to get dressed because I couldn't find my favorite leggings. So I had a power bar in the car too, like Theo. I get to school, my teacher's absent, sub is new. Oh yeah, I go to put my coat in the cubby and somebody put their coat in my cubby. One, rude, injustice, upset. Okay, I'm trying to keep it together. But then I start thinking about that my mom is out of town. My important person is out of town. They're not going to be back for a whole week. That seems like forever. I'm barely hanging on. I go to choose watercolor painting because that's my very, very favorite. And I go to it. It's not there because Millie has it over there. Oh, meltdown happens. So it's this banking up of this after this, after this, after this. And at some point, Alice just couldn't deal anymore. So the fall apart happens, unable to discuss, unable to reason, on all kinds of overload from all sorts of different areas, social overload and sensory overload. Alice melts down. Now, then, if we move to our school age classroom, we can meet Tamika. So Tamika didn't sleep well either. There were babies in all houses, right? But for whatever reason, she didn't sleep well either, right? Perhaps she stayed up late thinking about something that her friend told her on the playground that really hurt her feelings, and she's not sure how she feels about that, so she couldn't really go to sleep, right? So she didn't get the sleep that she's used to getting. Wakes up rushed because she overslept, right? She's school age, so she's in charge of her own alarm, but she just pressed snooze too many times. Whatever. She was overslept. So she's feeling rushed, couldn't find her backpack. She's supposed to have her backpack. She's responsible for her own backpack. She couldn't find it anywhere, right? By the time she found it, all of her other siblings were in the car and waiting for her, right? She isn't able to finish breakfast, so she gets a power bar in the car. And when she gets in the car clothes, she realized that maybe she has her leggings on backwards. They have a feel. She's not able to change them until later, right? She gets there, her favorite teacher is absent, and there's a substitute who's new and who's also mean, right? Not that substitute again, says Tamika. She thinks, okay, I'm going to go in the classroom. I'm going to find my best friend and we'll have snack together and then we'll work on this project together. But she's not there. She's absent today. Who is she going to work with? Who's going to be her partner? Who will she play with outside? All of this is in her mind now. So I'm going out to put my lunchbox in the cubby and I notice, hey, I used to have my art in here that I worked on yesterday, but it's gone now. I was going to finish it today. Where is it? Somebody moved my stuff. Oh, yeah. And her mom's out of town too. Or maybe her grandmom's visiting. Something's unusual. Different people are home. All of the fuss that it took, all of the time that it took, and fussing and figuring out what to wear, couldn't find the backpack. She made it her and everybody else late for school. Family's mad at her and annoyed, and everybody's already in partners by the time she comes into the classroom at the beginning. So what happens? That's it. She can't take anymore. Fall apart. There's the big meltdown. Whew. Deep breath. So you probably noticed some similarities between the toddler and the preschooler and the school age child, with what there are a lot of similar things that can lead to a meltdown. The way that they're experienced can be a little bit different, but the load that it puts on the child is felt really deeply by the child, whether they're 18 months or 4 years old or fourth grade. Any of those age groups can feel that amount of sensory overload in a little bit of a different way. They experience it differently, and it can lead to meltdown for each of them, you see. So as children get older, yes, they're learning skills. We're adults, we're still learning skills too. And some days we just can't pull those skills into action. We just can't access them for whatever reason. So what can we do to help? What can we do to help them address that load, right? One thing that we can do is our power of observation. Observe, 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 right? When we get to know children really well, the observation becomes easier, right? Because we get to know what to look for, right? And as we're getting to know children, the info that we get from observation is so important, so important. It helps us understand what would help. Would water help? Would a break help? Would food help? Would a big running in place or wall push-ups or some sort of movement or some sort of connection? What will help? Observation will help us get to what's going to help us address that load for that particular child. Another thing you can do to address the load is in your preparation of your environment, right? So in your space, is there a place for calm movement, for calm experiences? And is there also a place for active movement, right? It could be that a run in place or jump on a trampoline or some heavy work can help a child regulate, where another child going to a place where they can read a book by themselves and nobody's going to talk to them, that will help them regulate. So do you have options for both? GNC here stands for grace and courtesy. It's a traditional experience that happens in many Montessori schools, but not only in Montessori schools. So grace and courtesy is a conversation, a lesson, a how to do a thing. So whether it's a grace and courtesy on how to ask a friend to play, where you talk about and teach about, here's how to ask a friend to play. Would you like a turn? Would you like a turn? Kind of like that. So they can practice, right? So it could be a GNC on how to ask a friend to play, or a GNC on how to go to the cozy corner when you notice your emotions getting really big, or how to walk around someone's rug, or how to blow your nose. I mean, you can have a grace and courtesy about all kinds of things, right? GNC on how to be human, right? And all that entails. Okay. Another thing you could do to address their load is to acknowledge their pace. This one, I added this one in because that's something that's really helpful for me to remember again and again and again as an educator and as someone who is an important adult in the life of lots of children, is to acknowledge their pace. Not necessarily their walking pace, but that's important too. But their processing pace, right? How fast am I talking? How many words am I talking? How much do I expect? Right? Do I allow a beat or two or more for them to process what it is that I said before I either repeat myself or ask them if they understood or jump in with something else, right? So often that pause that looks a little something like this, where you wait, and wait, can feel like a long time to us, but we're not doing all the processing that the child may be doing, right? So consider that as you go forward and as you're noticing and you're asking someone to do something or to try something new or to calm down, that we acknowledge their pace and give them some space to do that big work of processing that we know that they're doing. And sometimes we forget. Okay, the last one is near, middle, and far. This is a technique that I teach in lots of my classes because it's just so good. It helps in lots of different circumstances, but it goes like this. So near, middle, and far, usually I start with far and I look at something that's far away. So I'm going to invite you to do that with me right now. So pause right now, put down all your stuff if you've got stuff in your hands, and look at something that's far away. Maybe it's through a window or down a hallway, and just look at it and focus. What color is it? What's the shape? What's the texture? What if you were to rub it, what would it feel like on your hands? Okay, you see it? Okay, now find something in the middle distance, maybe 5 or 6 feet away. So look at it, focus on it, color, texture, line. Now look at something close up, like your hand or something that you're holding. Look at it. What is the color, texture, right? So what we've done is something that is almost universally calming, where you focus on something far away, middle, and close. Ideally, you're isolating one sense. So my visual, I'm looking at that leaf, I'm looking at my curtain, I'm looking at the line. So you could do that for yourself to regulate when you are at your total load capacity. This is a GNC that you can teach children and others to do when they feel their emotions getting really big. It's also something that you can slip into conversation with children when you notice from your observation that they're beginning to become activated. Their emotions are getting really big. They're heading toward meltdown or tantrum, right? And you can actively go, oh, whoa, do you see that bird up there? Or do you hear that bird? Oh, it's like the birds on that painting. Do you see that painting on the shelf right there? I love that red, right? What do you think? Do you like red? Okay. Oh, and look, do you see that on my hand? Right? So you're taking them from far, middle, and near through casual conversation. Maybe another time you give a more formal grace and courtesy about far, middle, and near, and how you can do that when you're beginning to feel upset. And then practice, role play that. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take a deep breath because we have a part 2 of what you can do. Some more things you can do. Another big nod to GNC, grace and courtesy. Give that grace and courtesy early and often. So often at the beginning of a school year, you're going to give a lot of those. How to get snack, where's the bathroom, how to go to the bathroom, how to let somebody know that you're going to the bathroom, how do you wash your hands, how do you blow your nose, how do you ask a friend to play. You're going to be giving lots of those at the beginning of the year. But throughout the course of the year, there are lots of other new grace and courtesies or lessons that you can give throughout the year to help children gain those skills as they're growing, right? Another thing that you can do is offer a variety of tools. So children who are more sensory sensitive to that feeling of pumpkin stuff on their hands, maybe they have tools. They can use tools. Other varieties of tools that you can give have to do are like fidgets, right? Now, when I worked with our elementary students at a school that I worked with recently, we had a grace and courtesy, or social story, if you will, about fidgets, right? The main message was that fidgets are tools, not toys. So if it helps you focus, carry on. If it distracts you, then that's not quite the right fidget for right now, right? So what is it? Offer a variety of those. So I have one that I use quite a bit. Maybe you've seen it in the corner of the screen, right? It's just a little springy like this that feels really good to rub on my hand, right? So you may have something like that too, or a spinning ring or something like that. Others might have a squishing element to it, or a slippery element to it, right? Or a clicking element to it. So offer a variety. Everybody's going to want to try it at first. Everybody's going to want to put their hands on all the things. And then, trust me, they will begin to self-select what works for them, what not, what doesn't really work for them. Everybody's going to try it out. And the ones who really need it are the ones who are going to use it, right? So the children who need the scooper in the pumpkin will use the scooper. And the children who don't need the scooper will use their hands or whatever else you have available. So offer a variety of tools and adaptations that children can self-select after they've checked it out, right? Next is encourage and nourish that proprioceptive and vestibular diet? Are there plenty of places and spaces to do heavy things, to push something that's heavy, to lift something that's heavy? An important tool that we had in our classroom before there were many children who needed additional P&V input, and we had a ream of paper, and that ream of paper was something that oh, would you mind taking this to the classroom next door? Or can you take this ream of paper and put it over there on that shelf, please? Thank you. And for a preschooler or even an older toddler, carrying that ream of paper is kind of heavy. So it gives them that sensory input and groundedness in a way that's purposeful, right? So a milk jug, a ream of paper. Oh, could you help me move this table from here to here? Oh, here's a friend that can help you. We're going to move the table. I don't like it right there. Can we move it back? Thank you so much. I appreciate your help. Right. And what you've done is you've given some purposeful, meaningful experiences where they can get that proprioceptive and vestibular need met. Right. Okay, let's see. That's just a few simple ideas. There are loads and loads and loads of more ways to nourish that P&V diet, right? Carol Kranowitz talks about a full sensory diet, right? I can reach out to me. I can send you more info on that if you want to know more about how to develop in your prepared environment more sensory rich diet for all of your children. Let's see, there was something else I was going to tell you about that. It left me. It'll come back later. Okay. Children are going to really reach toward that which feels satisfying or that gets them out of an uncomfortable situation, right? So when we notice and we observe, we can channel that energy into something that is purposeful and acceptable, right? If you have a student who's going to all the children and is hugging them and picking them up off the ground, and everybody's kind of annoyed by that, you can go, I observe there's some sort of sensory seeking behavior there. How can I give him something that will activate that? So, oh, he wants to pick up things. Please help me pick up this heavy table. Or can you carry this stack of books to the library? Right? Give them something that is purposeful and acceptable, but also kind of addresses that need that they're trying to express at that point, right? And that's kind of a fun, creative thing to do. So now's the time to pause and write. So we've got lots of ideas to share, the things that you can do, part 1 and part 2. So now take some time. Take a good chunk of time and write down which of these really resonated with you. Are there more that you already do that you want to keep doing, right? Because you don't want to replace things that work, right? So keep doing what works, right? And is there something else that you'd like to add as options in your classroom? Okay. So what else can you do? So pause and write. And when you're ready, come on back. All right, now it's time to turn our attention to the power of observation. So I'm curious, what do you do already? All right, do you have a process of observation that you already do? If you don't do this already, I would love for you to add this to your toolbox and to the routine of your week. If at all possible, you're going to give a grace and courtesy to the children about what it means when you have, oh, I don't have a scarf, when you have this scarf over your shoulder. When I have this scarf on my shoulder here, I'll use this towel. When this is on my shoulder, this means that I'm doing my work. I'm taking a few moments to observe the classroom. I want to see what's happening. I want to see how everyone's working and playing and having fun. So when this is on my shoulder, I'm not available. Okay. You can come back to me as soon as I take this off and I whatever put it on the shelf. Right. So give a grace and courtesy of when you're not available. Okay. That is preliminary to you doing observation, where you actually do this. Sit down in a chair and observe. Find a space with an adult chair that's comfortable for you, where you can see your classroom and observe. You might have something specifically that you're observing. Maybe it's a particular child or a couple of children and their dynamic, or how a particular material is being used, or how a particular space in the classroom is being used, et cetera, depending on what you're observing, right? So you can do this. Start off with giving yourself, I don't know, 1 minute a day. Set a timer if you need to. Work up to 2 or 3, 5 minutes a day when you're in your job at that moment is to observe. Now, if it's something safety, I mean, if somebody's running with scissors over there, then of course you're going to stand up, stop observing, and go tend, right? So if it's a safety thing, go take care. If it's not a safety issue and you see struggle happening and maybe a spill is about to happen, try as best you can to sit on your hands if you need to and wait. I feel like we talked about that at the beginning of the webinar in part 1, that power of allowing for some of that struggle to happen, right? Within reason. In that struggle is where great learning happens. Am I right? So in our the power of observation, in that we're talking about that, I just want to give all of you full permission, as if you needed it from me, but to set aside some time every day to observe some element of your classroom. Bonus extra credit if you can make it to 5 minutes every day. Can you do 10 minutes? I don't know. I think you can. Okay. But the data you receive from that observation is going to make so much easier. So there's my rah moment about that. Now let's talk about the different kinds of tools that you can use, and different kinds of observation that you can do. One is checklists. What do you notice? How many children are engaged in work? How many conversations are happening? Who's working with what type of work? Right? So you've got checklists that you're just checking. 1, 2, this one, this one, this one, this one. Another type of observation is narrative. What is it that you see and you write it in paragraph, kind of short story form, narrative. The next one is anecdotal. So in little bits and stories. Next is data driven. That's actually more the check. How many children are doing this? 1, 2, 3. How many children are doing this now? 1, 2, 3. So over time, you can look back at your data that you've collected and see, oh, more children are successfully making bids for friendship before snack, and less children are having successful bids for connection right before nap or whatever. So your data can tell you and can reveal patterns that are happening through the day. I'm kind of a data loving girl. So, okay. So there are different types of observation tools that you can use. Okay. So the next 2 slides are really dense. Okay. So we're just going to take a deep breath. I wish I wrote them, but I didn't. I want to give credit where credit is due. This is from NCMPS, National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector. They have really incredible resources there. Go and and learn all you can from them. But this is a bit from a workshop I took from them a little while ago. And there was a chunk of this training around the importance of observation and what you can observe, right? So this is one way that you can say that you can narrow, or not narrow, can focus your observation. What is it that I'm observing today or this week? Or what am I observing and what is my colleague observing, and what do we both see, right? So you could focus that up by looking at different things. The first one would be, what about my children and how are they doing with fine motor? What does it look like? What can I observe? What is true and what is for real? What is happening, right? So how do they grasp and hold objects? Which fingers and which hand do they use? What grip do they use on a paintbrush or pencil? Which fine motor skill activities do they choose? And what fine motor skills are they practicing? Posting or threading or whatever. So, for example, if you're taking a look at what's happening in your classroom around fine motor, you might begin to notice from this observation that some children are either struggling with this or are doing well. Some children may be seeking this fine motor movement and some may be avoiding that. Now let's take a look at the one just below it, gross motor, right? So maybe you're observing this area, right? So how do they come to sit or stand? What is their body doing? How do they walk? What's the distance of their legs and arms movement, legs or arm movements? What about balance? How is their balance on one foot or shifting from one foot to another? What gross motor skills are they practicing? Do they choose activities which use gross motor skills or not? Does the environment help or hinder movement, right? So in this area, when you're focused on this, when this is your focus of observation, this can give some real insight into the P and V, right? So what's their balance? How tightly are they grasping, or how loosely are they grasping? Does it make sense? Is it useful? Is it effective in what it is that they're doing in that moment, right? Okay, so that's gross motor. And then we've got emotional development, eating, and sleeping. So you see, and I won't read all of them to you because you can do that. you can observe in different areas, right? It doesn't have to be a full 1 hour observation where you're looking at everything, but it could be Mondays are fine motor Mondays, Tuesdays are gross motor Tuesdays, however you'd like to do it. But in looking at these different areas, in addition to the second page of different areas that you could look at, communication, what's their language skills, speech skills like, cognitive development, what do you notice? What are they interested in, etc. Social development, independence, clothing, and observing ourselves, which is tricky. So there are lots of different areas that you can choose to focus on. So my hope is that you can use this as inspiration to give your observation some direction and some focus, right? There is value in the open observation where you're just observing the vibe. You know what I mean? Like what's the feel of the classroom right now? What do I notice? It could be that you're doing an observation of your space. Oh, I need to move that shelf. Or, wow, I need to take that down because or dust that because it's really dusty. Or, oh, I didn't realize that actually that frame was cracked, right? Sometimes we get so busy, we just miss stuff like that. So when you give yourself that permission and create and protect that time to do observation, your practice is going to deepen, deepen, and deepen, right? Okay, I want to come back to this, especially the area of self-observation and observing ourselves. This one's tricky. It takes some vulnerability and it takes some courage and honesty. It's really helpful to have a colleague that we trust and respect and who trusts and respects us back to help us with this observation, to where we are observing ourselves. What tone do we use? What do we say, and how do we say it to children? Am I recording what I'm saying to children? How do I respond when this happens or that happens? Right? So when you can do that self-reflection, and maybe a colleague can also reflect, are you saying the same things? Are you seeing the same things? Right? That can be a really risky and vulnerable conversation to have. But I just strongly encourage you to find that person and cultivate that relationship that can help you grow in this area. Okay. Okay. Deep breath. I'm gonna have some water. Okay. So now we're going to take a shift, right, away from observation to the next chunk of this webinar. Okay. Nature designs us to be movers and doers. So remember praxis? We talked about that at the very beginning, or beginning vocabulary, right? So over the next little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about infants. Then we're going to talk a little bit about toddlers, then preschoolers, and then school-age children, right? Notice that there will be some similarities and some differences. So, spoiler, I just gave a spoiler alert there. Okay, so infant edition, let's talk about it. Okay, yes, this is dense. It's also in your workbook, so you can turn to that and read it there if you'd like. But some things that we can do to support our infants in classrooms and support their P&V growth are right here. So, in your classroom, do you have real tools and things that have some weight to them, right? That's it. That's important. Next, when children have meltdowns, right? How can you, or you can help them organize by rocking them back and forth or up and down, right? Infants, it's more realistic that we can pick them up, right? We're always going to forecast that I'm picking you up, I'm going to pick you up, I'm scooping you up. So you're forecasting your actions any and every time you have physical contact with a child, right? It's all about consent. We could talk about consent another time, but yes. Oh, you're upset. I'm going to help you. I'm going to pick you up now, right? This is not safe. I'm going to move your body. Here we go. So you're forecasting, right? So rocking back and forth or up and down can be very organizing to a neurological system and to their body. Up and down, side to side, back and forth, right? Rotary movement is an intense vestibular stimulation for children who are craving that. So this back and forth is really is something that cravers or sensory seekers are really looking for. So the spinning around and spinning around can be something that they would really enjoy, especially if they're cravers of vestibular sensory input. Cross many planes of movement. So you can offer something in the diagonal or organize on one plane. So when they're on their belly or on their back, there's something that they could do to reach and cross, right? To help them organize on one plane. So whether it's on a horizontal plane, so they're reaching horizontally this way, or it's in the vertical plane, which is up and down, and they have to reach up or down, pick and like that, or it's in the sagittal plane, right? So they're going forward or going backward depending on their age and their mobility at that point, right? Next, remember that too much vestibular can cause an overload. Too much of anything, really. So sometimes too much spinning or rocking back and forth can be too much. So again, your observation skills are on point here. So we're noticing for signs of overload and we stop before them, right? For challenging behaviors, like the bumping and the crashing and the throwing, what can you offer for resistive play, right? Like some bike tires or rubber, those stretchy things that have some sort of resistance when you push it, right? A body sock or a stretch band. A body sock is made out of swimsuit material pretty much. So that's something that you can push and pull, right? Making shapes with those can be really fun as your children are getting older. Now, this is very young children, so it could be that you're doing that alongside them. You can offer the choice to be on the floor, or offer a table where they can stand to work. Now, we're talking about our infants, so let's just be mindful. They're probably not going to be standing to work yet, right? But where are their choices to be, right? On the floor here, over here, back, stomach, right? People sandwich, which is rolling up in a yoga mat or in a blanket or a towel where you can rock them back and forth and back and forth. Variation on this is for older children where you can add some mustard and squish it out, that kind of thing. Give them objects that they can push and pull as they are ready, as they are getting older and they're older infants. What can they push and what can they pull, right? Swaddling can be very satisfying to a child who might be becoming on sensory overload. Let's remember that our youngest infants, their neurological systems are brand new. So often in the very early stages, that sense of swaddling can feel really comfortable, right? And they will let you know when that swaddling, when they're done with that, right? So observe and be in communication, because they're going to communicate through their body when they're finished or when they're seeking something. Offer big paper, draw to the music. I'm actually going to add that to the next one, okay? Because that's really for toddlers and beyond. Okay, so is there anything else for my infant teachers out there that you might add or adjust in here to meet the needs of your infant students? So if you're an infant teacher, pause right now and write those down. And when you're ready, come on back. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about toddlers. So nature designs us to be movers and doers, toddler edition. So you'll notice that there are some similarities here to the earlier one, right? So let's go through them. Real tools and weights are important. Yes. Meltdowns help them organize by rocking back and forth. What about a trampoline or someplace where they can jump, right? As they are gaining that mobility skill, right? Rotary input, rotary movement is intense vestibular stim for cravers, just like infants. So is there a place to spin? Is there a place to turn around and around? Crossing many planes of movement, something in the diagonal or organize in one plane. So again, horizontal, what can they reach for across the diagonal? What can they reach for in the vertical? Pick and put. And what about the sagittal as they begin to move and toddle forward, right? Next, too much vestibular can cause overload. Same. Bumping and crashing. Same. What can they do? Where could they bump? Where could they crash? That's not their friend and pushes their friend down and somebody ends up crying. We don't want that. So what can we give them that satisfies that need in a way that's okay? So a body sock or a stretch band or something that they can push or squeeze or press, right? Offer the choice to be on the floor or on a table or where they can maybe stand to work, offering lots of different options and seating options, standing options, resting options. Deep pressure. I don't think we've talked about this yet, but get this. In our joints, right, all of our joints throughout our body are specialized cells, specialized pressure cells whose job it is to tell our brain what's happening in our joints, right? So they can feel the pressure of, okay, big muscles contracting, big muscles releasing, little muscles contracting, little muscles releasing. So there's lots of information passed back and forth through these specialized pressure cells and the brain, right? So when you see this deep pressure, this is where it comes from. What you're doing is you're activating those pressure cells to let the brain know, okay, I've got that pressure need satisfied, all is well in the world. Okay. So this deep pressure, and it doesn't mean to squish them hard, because remember, you want to gentle, right? You don't want to hurt them, right? Because their hands are still developing and everything is still developing. So a gentle pressure, gentle deep pressure can be very satisfying for somebody who is seeking that proprioceptive input, right? So pizza baby is something that I did with my children and with children that I worked with in a school, is where you roll them you have like a blanket where you roll them up. So they're in the blanket and you're using the blanket to roll back and forth. You know what I mean? Sometimes we call it burrito baby. And so we tuck, wrapped them, tucked, and rolled them like that, So that increases the sensory awareness of their proprioceptive sense. So, and it can be really satisfying for somebody who is seeking out that, right? So you meet that need and it's satisfied for the time being. Next, give objects a weight to push and to pull. Cozy cocoon is kind of a variation on that burrito baby. Offer some big paper and draw to the music. So whatever mark making tool that they use, whether it be crayon or chalk or whatever, what marks can they make? And maybe you use music to inspire that, or not, or an instrument, as you wish. There's someone I want to recommend that you find and follow, and it's I think it's Senge Mossy, who does a lot of this art and music and movement work with children and adults. But it's really interesting and innovative and creative, and it often involves really big paper. So check it out. So for our toddler teachers here or anybody else, if you want to pause and write down all that you want to write down, and when you're ready, push play, and I'll be right here. Okay, now we're back. So nature designs us to be movers and doers, preschool edition. So all of your preschool teachers out here we are. Now notice, you're going to see I'm repeating myself. Yeah. So number one, real tools and weights are important. Yes. Meltdowns, rocking forward and back, up and down. A trampoline is something that might help. Yes. Rotary movement, right? Do you have some place where spinning can happen, right? Where it's a safe place to spin, right? Sometimes a pole on the playground is really useful to spin around. Yeah. Okay, next, crossing many planes of movement. A big chalkboard can help with this, right? That is in vertical, right? Let's see. I do want to give a kind of a shout out to Brain Gym. I'm not a trainer for that, so it's registered and copywritten and all that. But that kind of approach is really helpful. So check it out if you want to. And the big chalkboard doing the lazy eights across like this can be really useful, right? Two hands at the same time doing that, powerful and helpful in regulating. Okay, next, remember that too much vestibular can cause an overload, right? Bumping and crashing. Where can you give them a place to bump and crash, to press and pull, whether you use some sort of body sock or a stretch band, or you're making biscuits and you're pressing through dough, right? Where can they push and bump and crash in a way that's okay? Offer the choice to be on the floor or a table or a place to stand and work. Deep pressure again. So, the cozy cocoon, pizza baby, burrito baby, those are all also can be fun. Again, I want to remind with all of those, you're forecasting every single action and you're asking for consent. Is it okay if we do burrito baby? And then they'll say yes or they'll say no. And then you carry on, right? Always ask and seek that enthusiastic yes. Okay, next, again, big paper to draw and paint. Is there anything else that's coming to mind? So now's the time to pause and write all of those ideas. When you're ready, just press play and I'll be right here. Okay, here is a school age edition of being movers and doers as nature has designed us. Amy, you're being so redundant. I know you're saying that. So as you see the repeat suggestions here, think as a teacher who works with these particular children. Think about the materials that are in your prepared environment right now, right? So the materials that are in a toddler classroom and the materials that are in a school age classroom for those different types of planes of movement, horizontal, vertical, and sagittal, it's going to look a little different, right? So that's the place where each of you have the opportunity to get creative with what you have in your space, right? You could see that the goals are very similar, right? You're giving a lot of opportunity to move their bodies in a variety of ways, in ways that are kind and welcome and useful and safe, all of that, right? So again, real tools, real weight is important, right? Meltdowns help them organize by offering a space to rock forward and back, up and down, maybe even a trampoline, right? So the repetitive rocking motion is something that's universal and universally calming, right? Next, rotary movement, right? Intense, but where can they spin? Is there a place that they could spin? Across those many planes of movement, do you have a big chalkboard? Do you have opportunity to have a follow me dance party, right? Our school age kids love that. So maybe it's on a particular time of day, or you have a cue that it's dance break and everybody dances for 1 minute and then goes back to whatever it is they're doing. However, and whatever style you have as a teacher, whatever kind of program you have, how would that work? What would big movement breaks look like? Is it a straight up dance party? Is it 30-second movement breaks at the bottom of every hour? Is it right after lunch? There's an opportunity to stretch and move, right? Throughout the day, particular time of day. Okay, you decide. Let's see. Yes, vestibular, too much vestibular can cause overload. That's when you see them twirl and fall down. Think about the resistive play and the resistive experiences that you offer, the body sock or a stretch band. Is there a kind of work that they could choose that activates their big muscles? Things that maybe projects that they work on where they have to move their tables together, or they have to move this from here to there, where they're activating their big muscles, which are still under development, and are making those connections between their brain and their muscles at lightning speed. Okay, next. Is there a variety of seating? So I have here, offer the choice to be on the floor or a table or a standing table. Also consider for our school age children and preschool children too, a variety of seating options. So is there a wobble seat available, a seat insert, which can be pumped up more full of air and it's more tight, or you release some of the air and it's a little squishier, right? Is there different types of maybe rocking seats, or seats that have 4 legs, or those kick bands that you can get to put on the front of the table legs or the chair legs. So check those out as possible adaptations for your school age children and maybe for your preschool students too. Check it out. Next, deep pressure. increase that sensory awareness of our proprioceptive senses. So as our children are growing older, we're probably going to hug them less and less, right? Yeah. So what can they do for themselves? So we can give them that grace and courtesy of giving themselves a deep pressure, squishes, right? What about a beanbag chair, which increases that sensory awareness of a hug, right? Beanbag chairs are really great for that. Next, what are some real life experiences that you can offer that encourage pushing or pulling, right? Cozy cocoon space. So as you're developing that sensory space, is it cocoon-like? As your children get older, your school-age children get older, they can offer some insight and maybe some recommendations or suggestions of what works, right? Next, offer big paper to paint and draw. Always, I'm a big fan of that for everybody. So for our school-age teachers, let's pause here. Write down more of your ideas and what you plan to do. And when you're ready, let's come on back. Okay, we're back. And my good friend Carol Kranowitz, I had to put this in before we closed up. But check it out. She says, when we make it harder for them as children, we make it harder for them as adults. I'd like to just put that out there for everyone taking this webinar to consider this. How am I easing the way for children? Not that you're making it easy, because, I'm a firm believer of in the struggle is where the learning happens. Yes, yes, yes. But are we allowing for that struggle to happen so that they gain that skill, so that it's easier for them as adults? They get those skills early intervention. We talked about that at the top of the webinar, is so important and makes such an impact. Yeah. So where can we make it where children gain the skills? They have the opportunity to get that skill under their belt so that when they're adults, it's not as hard for them. And when we think about, we've talked about sensory seeking children who sensory seek, children who sensory avoid. There are also children who may be a little more cautious that may not have anything to do with big sensory input, right? So check it out. It could be that children are cautious because there's a vestibular system issue, right? So if there's a vestibular system issue, that may cause them to be more cautious or more careful. So that's one piece. And another piece is that you may have cautious children who are cautious because of experiences, right? So with either in mind, let's take a look at some ideas that we can assist with children who tend to be more cautious than other typically developing children in our classroom. Okay, so what some ideas are, start low, where the impact of a fall is lower, right? So tape on the floor is a great beginning. Tiptoeing across the tape, heel toe, marching along the tape. Once you got that down, let's try a 2x4, and a piece of wood that's long, but it's flat on the ground. Practice and refine that movement and that skill, right? Achieve mastery on the 2x4. And then maybe you just raise one end, put a brick underneath one, or a rock or a stump or something, so that the 2x4 becomes an incline. They've got those skills. Now they're refining them even more by taking it on an incline. Next, obstacle courses are your friend. So there's so much you could do with some yarn or string and some tape. The possibilities are endless. Going over, under, around, through, right? Think as you're building obstacle courses, think of this. Think about, do you have a horizontal element where they have to be, their bodies are in a horizontal plane? Is there an element in your obstacle course where their body is vertical, up and down, up and down? And is there an element in your obstacle course that is sagittal, which is forward and back? right? Those are the three planes of movement, and blends of those planes. All movement happens on one or a variation combination of those three planes. Wow, huh? Okay, next, levitation in a chair, right? So you could try this where they're sitting in a chair and they push their hands on the seat beside their legs and just push their body up and down, push their body up and down, right? So the risk is low, and they're impacting their world and lifting their body a little bit at a time, right? Arm circles, the vertical chalkboard. What else? What else can we offer children who tend to be more cautious to practice and gain the skills and achieve mastery? Okay, so let's pause here and write. Anything else you'd like to add to that list for assisting children who are more cautious? Okay, now we're back. Final thoughts. We're getting to the end of our webinar together. Can you believe it? It is, it's happening. So some final thoughts. Children are really so courageous to come to school every day. And what's true is they probably don't have a lot of decision in that, but they do again and again. So let's think about that for a minute, right? They're coming, they're managing their bag of tokens, they're managing their total load capacity. They're managing all the new sensory experiences that are happening, whether they're sensitive or are seeking. They're learning how to be friends and how not to be friends and how to do this. And there's so much new, and there's so much struggle. So when we think about that, let's consider what's happening for them in their life, in their mind, in their heart before they even get to you. What may be happening on a neurological level? What are they experiencing in their body? What is that feeling of the irritating tag or the socks whose seam is off? What might that be feeling if they have a neurological sensitivity to that, right? How can we, as educators, respond in positive and uplifting, kind and respectful ways to children rather than shaming them and getting frustrated, right? Even when things seem to go sideways, remember, children are doing the best they can with what they got. It shows and reveals to us an opportunity where we can teach and guide and lead children so that they feel happy and healthy and safe. So I think this might be your last pause and write. There might be one more. But to think about those considerations, right? And what do you think? Is there a child in your mind? Maybe you flip back to the beginning of your workbook and you go back to the child that brought you to this class in the first place, maybe. And what kind of answers would you write to these questions about that particular child? So we'll pause for a moment and let you write this. Okay, now we're back. So remember, regulated means that your energy level matches the task. It doesn't mean calm, right? So when we say to ourselves, oh, this child is dysregulated, what are they doing? Are they dysregulated when they're running and it's outside? No, their energy is matching the task. Are they dysregulated when they're running while we're trying to give a lesson or trying to read a book? Maybe that's dysregulation. So going forward, consider and notice what language do you use and when, especially around regulation. And remember, regulated means that your energy level matches the task. Doesn't mean calm. Okay. So this is the last inspiring bit that I want to share with you. And it's a time to pause this, go to that link that's in your workbook and watch this, this video. It's on YouTube as an inspiration for us to breathe, for us to help our children remember to breathe. What happens on our brain level when we breathe. So pause now, go watch, and when you're ready, come on back. Okay, now we're almost done. Can you believe it? Now's the time to set your goal. What is it that you plan to do? What's your big takeaway from this class, from this webinar, from this class? What's something that I never thought about that before, or I don't know what I think about that. I'm gonna think about that some more. Or what is it that I'm gonna take and put into action right away? What do I plan to do? You don't have to do all the things tomorrow. Okay. You've got this recording, you can come back to it anytime. But what's one small bit that you can put into place? One small change that over time, that trajectory will completely change, right? So, permission to not do it all, but what is one thing that you plan to do? All right. I hope that you've taken some time to write that down. Sometimes writing it down and writing down who it is that you're going to tell about so they can help you hold yourself accountable. It's always helpful, right? Okay, so that is it, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Here are the ways to connect with me and to reach out with me on Instagram and Facebook and the email and website, all the things. A reminder to those of you who would like credit for this in Oregon and ORO, let me know when you have finished the final quiz so that I could send you your certificate. Okay, so that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me. It is an honor to prepare this work for you and to help you feel calm and confident in the way that you show up as the important adult for children in your lives. All right, until next time, take care.